Okay, so welcome to another live stream, guys. This should be a lot of fun because today, of course, we're looking at a different part of the BFC Awards. So to go straight into it, today we're looking at the British Menswear Designer of the Year. And of course, you have Craig Green for Craig Green. We have Grace Wells Bonner for Wells Bonner, Jonathan Anderson for JW Anderson and LOEWE. You've got Kiko Kostadinov. You've also got Kim Jones. I don't know why my camera's doing that. There we go. Um, then you also have Martine Rose for Martine Rose. So this should be a lot of fun. Let me guys know. Before we even start, let me know who you think will win. We can start by that. Hello, everyone. Hello, hello, hello. How is everyone doing? I also I'm not sure if all of you can see it, but I also put a poll in the chat. So you guys can vote for whoever you think should win. Okay, so someone is saying Martine Rose. Interesting. Queen says, I think JW and LOEWE for sure deserved it. AB is saying he misses Virgil Abloh. So actually, before I start today, one thing I will have to say to you guys is that I won't be covering Kim Jones or JW Anderson's work, mainly because we talked about JW Anderson and, you know, him at LOEWE in the last live stream. And I also think that we need to give some more airtime for other designers. I feel like I reviewed all of JW Anderson's shows as well as Kim Jones over and over again. So I think that, you know, it's best if we don't cover that today. Also, something weird that I noticed was that JW Anderson is a nominee for Designer of the Year. He's a nominee for British Menswear Designer of the Year. He's a nominee for British Women's Wear Designer for the Year. So either way, one way or another, he's definitely going to win an award. Like, that's just facts. If he doesn't win the Designer of the Year award, it's very, very likely that he's going to end up winning British Menswear Designer of the Year or Women's Wear Designer of the Year. Her sock 2 says, I hope Kiko Kostadinov. But anyway, let's jump straight into it because a lot of these designers, which is actually quite rare, I'm a fan of all the designers that are nominees in this category. Obviously, I'm a fan of some designers more so than others. But it's really fun to actually, you know, talk about designers that I like for a change and spread some positivity into the world. So first, of course, we're going to be talking about Craig Green. And his main collection that he's done this year is his Spring Summer 25 collection. I would say that Craig Green is definitely a mainstay in British fashion. I mean, he's built a cult following through his workwear-inspired collections. He won the Menswear Designer of the Year award many times, actually, I think in 2016, 17, and 18. So it'll be cool to see if he can add to his illustrious career in this award. But to go into the most recent show that Craig Green did, which is the Spring Summer 25 collection, you can actually find the show notes on Show Studio if you guys are interested. But to read them quickly, it says, the outlines of who we're supposed to be and the imprints we leave behind walk side by side. The rough grip of inherited codes and the rhythmic appeal of successive repetitive forms admired and followed. Stoically familiar figures reveal intricate and delicate constructions on closer gaze. Like a young boy exploring an engine, components are carefully taken apart. Separating hard and soft, rigid forms multiply and interlock, while lightweight drapery steadily dissolves. Hazy photographic impressions wash over the body and hang in the air beyond. Finally fading, a sudden return to the tangible renders everyday images sharper and more beautiful than before. So I'm sure by now you guys can guess what the inspiration behind this collection is. But for those of you that aren't aware, it was definitely a very personal collection. Of course, he talks about, having these interwoven inspirations, and a lot of the inspiration point and the starting point of this collection was actually the unfortunate passing of his father last year. And he started to look at the relationships that are built between a father and a son. And to quote him directly, he said, "Since then, I've been thinking a lot about the relationships between sons and fathers and that kind of dual expectation you have of each other. It's kind of about that tension." And you can see the tension in the clothes. You can see that he's almost deconstructing and reconstructing the clothing, but he's almost leaving them as the deconstructed form. I also like kind of the interplay with a lot of things that he did. He has this sort of belt construction that you guys are seeing on the screen, but I also see it as kind of like a male corset. It's almost like a way to present a male sense of corsetry, which is really cool. You also see many other ideas, like you see these deconstructed handkerchiefs hanging on pieces that you'll see in a bit. That is very interesting because if you think of like kids, if we're talking about, young boys, handkerchiefs are actually used sometimes as bibs for kids. So I found that kind of a very fun and interesting way of playing with that idea. Also, the location of the runway show is very interesting. It was actually in his studio in Silvertown. It's quite funny, kind of like a side note. I used to live in Pontoon Dock in London, and I remember one of my friends came to visit one time, and he was like, "Do you know that that's Craig Green's studio?" And I actually found out where Craig Green's studio was, and I'd been living like very close to it and didn't have a clue. So yeah, that was like a really funny thing that happened. But to go further, also something I really like is kind of like this idea of taking apart the panels of a garment, the way that, let's say, a young boy, when we're talking about the relationship between young boys and their dads, you see young boys, they like to break apart toys and fix toys, and they like to deconstruct things. There on the piece on the screen right now, you can see what I was talking about earlier, which is this idea of, trucks and tractors. And to quote Craig Green's thoughts on that, he said, "I always think it's strange that in children's bedrooms, they have pictures of tractors and fire engines and cement mixers from the day you're born, even on the bibs you wore." So that's what those prints, you'll see tractors, you'll see different vehicles, lorries. That's what that is a reference to, alongside the handkerchiefs that have been transformed into a shirt, which I am a big fan of. They're kind of like a poncho and a shirt hybrid that I like. I just like how it looks aesthetically. I also think it also opens a very interesting conversation on how we're socialized as humans, or as boys specifically. That men have to be these industrious beings, which is why you tend to see with boys' toys, they tend to be these like bricks and tractors that you can fix the engines for and all these kind of things. So it's a very, very interesting take, and also it opens an interesting discussion on the way that a lot of us are socialized as boys. Rachel says, "We have a 6-year-old boy," and this is so accurate. He's putting attachment theory into clothing. I totally agree. Someone is saying it's too experimental. I don't think that the point of this collection is to be ultra commercial, though. I think that's the whole point. Luke, of course you would notice that Sarah Burton is in the audience. And someone is saying in the comments that they want Bianca Saunders to win. Bianca Saunders is not in the nomination list, but I do like Bianca Saunders. Boa saying Lego is goated. It's also very interesting. They have this ongoing Fred Perry collab. I'd love to know who the shoes are made by. Some of them look like Clark's collabs, but I'm not 100% sure because I haven't looked into it. And they also look like a similar design to the other Craig Green, like these shoes that Craig Green makes damn near every season. We also get a lot of Craig Green codes, whether we're seeing, the flowy fringes on top of knitwear. This is something we've seen so many times in a Craig Green collection. I'm also trying to see if we're going to see the Eastpak collab on the screen. Because there was a very interesting Eastpak collab where he designed this backpack which had these elongated straps all over the place. And then there were these removable pouches, which I thought was really cool. David Archer says, it's good stuff. I don't really feel it's men's designer of the year good though. So something I will say about Craig Green, now that we're talking about this, just to speak in general, I do think that I'm kind of sad. I don't know what's going on at the brand. I don't work there, but I'm kind of sad that Craig Green doesn't get more recognition. And I'm sad that the brand has almost slowed down in a total way. They show less, they get less press. I just wish there was a lot more buzz around the brand, because I do think that Craig Green's brand is super iconic. This piece is really cool. It's like a poncho, but it's also like a deconstructed sneaker in a way. Like you can see kind of like the eyelets for the laces has been turned into a front panel in the poncho in this look too. That's really interesting. But continuing what I was saying about Craig Green, I think the brand is so iconic, whether we're talking about fashion as a whole and even in like just London Fashion Week history. Of course, in menswear, especially in the archive pages and all that stuff, there are Craig Green collections that are literally like held in very high regard. One example of that is, if you guys remember the Fall Winter 2017 collection, that was the collection that had those scuba jackets and the color blocked workwear. I know people rant and rave about those collections, and the pieces from that collection actually go for so much money on Grailed. So yeah, I just think Craig Green is really iconic. And I'm just sad that the brand has slowed down for whatever reason. I don't know. I'm not there. But I hope that whatever's going on, they can kind of, move past that. And we're going to see the amazing workwear-inspired clothing from Craig Green once again. Michael Solano says, I 100% agree with you. The only time I see Craig Green be promoted is when he has a new Moncler collab. Yeah, or any other collab, to be honest, because he does collabs here and there, but I don't really see his name much. Also, I love this jacket, by the way, with that jacket is so nice. But yeah, I just don't really know what's been going on at the brand. But yeah, just for the sake of British fashion and just fashion as a whole, whatever's going on, I hope that they figure it out. Someone said, wasn't it that buyers don't fuck with him? I don't know. I don't do merchandising for Craig Green. I heard that, the recent sales figures haven't been like really, really great, but that is all rumors. So I don't really want to be promoting rumors. Rachel says, I like the style too, but someone I know from Idaho who is not a good person told me wearing FP is signaling. Oh, wait, who's FP? Human You says, I thought Brexit impacted his brand a lot. Oh, yeah, that definitely did happen, by the way. That's definitely true. That's definitely true. But yeah, it's sad how, there's so many talented designers, but for one reason or another, like, things don't really work out. It's sad when that happens. Let's just have a look at some of the looks close up. Even like this idea that I find interesting, which is kind of like this idea that you're looking at a normal jacket, but then it's kind of coming out of itself. There are elements of it that are coming out of itself, which gives it this dreamlike vibe, which I love, because if you're going back into the reference of, the relationship between a father and the son, also a young kid, the dreaming of it, I kind of like this idea of kind of like the internal parts and panels of a jacket kind of seeping outwards from the jacket. That's really cool. It's like the jacket itself is it's like it has some like tumors coming out from the inside. It's kind of cool. This is one of the pieces from the Fred Perry collab. Leo says, some of the coats in the show, even if experimental, are kind of dope. I totally agree with you there. Here we have like the handkerchief pieces with the the kid prints. They also have these accessories. You can see like the keychains with the handkerchiefs as well, which is cool. Very good with merchandising. I also really love Craig Green footwear every season. It's always really, really good. And this handkerchief shirt thing, I like it a lot. I also like the workwear pieces close to the end. Let me see if I can get there. Even these deconstructed sneakers turn into ponchos, I thought was a cool take. Yeah, these like workwear shirts, I like those. The jackets too, I was a big fan of those for sure. But yeah, what do you guys think about Craig Green generally? I'm just curious to get the temperature. Like, what do people think about Craig Green in 2024? Sometimes you need pieces that have exaggerated swagger. What does that mean? Exaggerated swagger. I really want to know what that means. Go through Craig Green's Instagram page, see if there's more information about some of the collabs and stuff. That would be cool to know. Rachel says, I'm liking what I see here. Someone is saying Lanfari is saying had better years. I can agree with you in the sense that this obviously isn't my favorite Craig Green collection. I have so many Craig Green collections that I'm an absolute fan of, and I'm definitely a fan of Craig Green the designer and a fan of the brand. But yeah, this collection, if we're going based on this collection, obviously with the awards and also Craig Green compared to everyone else on this list, whether we're talking about Martine, Kiko, Kim Jones, JW Anderson, Grace Wells Bonner, all these designers have put out multiple collections this year. They've had multiple collabs this year. So also his output is extremely limited. So I would be, just based on that, I'll be very surprised if he does win, even though I am a big fan of Craig Green, like a very, very big fan. But I would be surprised just based on those factors if he does win it. But like I've said before, he's won it many times before. So I'm sure Craig Green will be fine. Tosin says, Craig Green is so solid. He is just heavily overlooked. I totally agree. Joe Haffen says, really a sign of our times that Craig Green's shows aren't more widely applauded. Out of the people mentioned, he has the clearest, most individual and innovative style. It's also his flaw, not mass enough. I mean, it depends what you mean by most individual and innovative style. I think that Grace Wells Bonner has a very innovative style in her own way. Same thing with Martine Rose. Like, Martine Rose's boxy silhouette has kind of been readopted and copied by a lot of designers. I think actually a lot of them have a very distinctive style. I think the person that has the least distinctive style is probably JW Anderson, because I think he's an amazing designer and I love what he does, but I can't look at a jacket and know that it's JW Anderson unless like I just know exactly what season it's from, if that makes sense. So yeah, I think all of them do, to be honest. David Archer says, I always like Craig Green in theory, but he never makes it into my closet and I never see it on the streets, and I think that's the problem, not wearable. That's interesting, because I think that Craig Green is very wearable. I just think it depends on what pieces. So even in this collection I just showed you, I think there were a few pieces that were really cool and wearable. Of course, you have the Fred Perry collab, you have the workwear shirts, the handkerchief shirts, which are kind of wearable and commercial, but not basic also, which is kind of fun and cool to play with. And he also has like the permanent collection stuff, the more workwear leaning stuff that you go to DSM and you see the permanent collection stuff every season. So I think that, you know, there is stuff there that's wearable, but kind of the way it's presented on the runway, it does look a bit conceptual. It's kind of similar to Comme des Garçons Mainline, where Comme des Garçons Mainline looks insane presented, but then you look at it on the rack and you're like, oh, it's just skirts and shirts. It's just that on the runway, she sewed all of them together to look like a weird ball of just fabric mess. So I think it's kind of a similar case with Craig Green. Luke says it's always tragic when good press and acclaim doesn't translate to commercial success. It's a sad day when Kiko Kostadinov is a more successful designer. Jeez, what's your issue with Kiko Kostadinov? I love Kiko. I think Kiko's a really great designer. Damn. Tosin says J.W. Anderson has signatures, his animal bags, his belt totes, wallets, but he doesn't have a clear design element that you can see in the construction of the garments. Yeah, totally agree. People keep asking me if I've gone to Kiko yet. Not yet. So yeah, it was a really cool showing. That's the only collection that Craig Green has done this year. But yeah, it's cool to see what they do in the future. I'm a big fan of Craig Green. I hope that they continue to go from strength to strength. And yeah, just wishing all the best for the Craig Green brand. So next, we're going to talk about Grace Wells Bonner. Now, this is actually going to be interesting because I don't think I talk about Grace Wells Bonner at all, actually. Like, I don't talk about Wells Bonner very often, even though in passing I might say that I'm a fan of hers. In passing, I've said that I like her work. But this is actually a very good chance for me to give quite a few reasons as to why I like her work, kind of talking through her ideas, looking at some of the shows that she's done this year and kind of, you know, doing things that way. So yeah, it should be a lot of fun going through that. So she's had two main collections this year. She's had her Fall Winter 24 collection, which was titled Dream Study. She's also had her Spring Summer 25 collection, which was titled Midnight Palm. So first we'll be looking at Fall Winter 24, and then after we'll look at Spring Summer 25. So once again, if you guys want to read the show notes for the Fall Winter 24 collection, you can find it on Show Studio. Show Studio is a very, very great resource in terms of, you know, finding the show notes and some other information when it comes to a lot of the collections for these brands. So as you can see, clearly titled on the show notes, it was titled Dream Study. Now, this collection is actually inspired by Howard University and Grace Wells Bonner spending more time in the USA. For context, Howard University is actually a university in Washington, D.C., and it's widely known as one of the oldest HBCUs. HBCU stands for Historically Black Colleges and Universities. And so essentially for this collection, she was kind of studying the archive of Howard University on a trip to D.C. She was looking at the collegiate aesthetic. She was looking at the different yearbooks. That was actually one of the main inspiration points that she talked about in this collection. All of this information, by the way, is in the show notes. I'm just summarizing the show notes for you. So all this information, you can literally find it in the show notes. So yeah, she was looking at the American collegiate aesthetic. She was also, and it's actually, before I even go on to that, this collegiate kind of idea is something that I've seen Grace Wells Bonner do so many times historically. One of the first collections that I saw Grace Wells Bonner where I was like, this is really interesting, was Fall Winter 2019. I think that was also the first Grace Wells Bonner collection I ever reviewed. And the Fall Winter 2019 collection was when she was mixing like African tunics and African silhouettes with American football shirts. And that collection was very inspired by, you know, HBCUs. And she's had other collections that look at HBCUs. I can't remember exactly all the years of all the collections, but I remember the Fall Winter 19 collection because I do remember that being a collection where I was like, oh, this is actually really interesting. But going back to this collection, she was looking at writers like Zora Neale Hurston and looking at all the other alumni of Howard University and like kind of looking at the impact they've made. Zora Neale Hurston is actually someone who, of course, is an alumni of Howard University, but she's a filmmaker and a writer who regularly portrayed racial struggles in the early 20th century, especially in the South of America. So Grace Wells Bunner kind of took inspiration from a lot of her work, and also looking at other parts of the Howard archives, like I was saying, particularly the yearbooks from the 90s and kind of how they looked aesthetically and what the clothing looked like. Thalia said this was a cool collection. I was sad to miss our MoMA show. But anyway, continuing, because I'm trying to run through it before the show ends. But to quote her directly in her Vogue interview, which was actually a very interesting thing that she said, every year, and this is referring to the yearbooks and stuff like that when she was looking at the archives, she said, every year they have a homecoming with performances of different hip-hop artists coming to celebrate. So it was kind of both exploring the history of the place, but also this kind of musical intersection that's always been something important to me. So I was thinking about conscious and cosmic hip-hop, how it kind of takes on the mantle of intellectual thinking and kind of takes it further. And so that's a big reason why in this show you saw the likes of Yassine Bey, who's otherwise known as Mos Def, of course, a big hip-hop legend. He walked at the end with Grace Wells Bunner. He also performed during the show. That's why you see the varsity jackets. That's why you see, you know, the sweatshirts. You see the shearling jackets, the suits. Something I really love about Grace Wells Bunner's work actually is her work, and the tailoring and the aesthetic of the tailoring really reminds me of the Windrush generation. And I know a lot of people, because a lot of my audience is American, you might not be too familiar with what the Windrush generation is. So I'll actually pause this video and see if I can put that on the screen just so that you guys can get a sense of the Windrush. But essentially in the UK, it's very important in UK history. There's something that we call Generation Windrush. So in 1948, a boat called Windrush actually docked in Tilbury in Essex in the UK, and it contained hundreds of passengers from the Caribbean who were essentially revitalizing Britain post-war. They changed the British Nationality Act around the time to give people from different British colonies the right to work and live in Britain. And so that's why this kind of like Generation Windrush is like a big thing, because it was like a big wave of immigration from the Caribbean. And why I'm mentioning this actually, apart from obviously the like historical importance of it, is how they used to dress. Like, as you guys can see on the screen, they had a very specific style of tailoring that they used to wear that I see very heavily inspired in Grace Wells Bunner's work. And every time I see it, it just reminds me of that. It's so interesting to see. Like, I just see it and immediately I can see those references there in terms of the Windrush generation and how their tailoring looked, the prints and patterns, even the style of things, how they used to put things together. And I even think that she has referenced the Windrush generation before. I remember there was a lot of inspiration in one of her Adidas collabs where she made these Adidas tracksuits, which also look like how the Windrush generation used to look back then, when they used to wear tracksuits. They had a very cool way of just putting things together and like always looking stylish, even though a lot of them had like limited resources. But you know, the best creativity comes out of restriction, as we know to be the case. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that quickly before we go back to the show, just so you have more context as to when it comes to the tailoring, why it looks that way and kind of where the inspiration has come from. Human Yu is asking me, are you familiar with the Black Ivy style? I also see that in her work too. She's so great at looking across the diaspora and finding those aesthetic threads. I totally agree, because like I've said in past collections where she's kind of looking at African silhouettes and then kind of weaving those into collegiate looks and stuff, which I find really cool. So she does have a way of kind of, which is very hard, merging all those elements into one and everything still looking cohesive. So that's something that I'm a big fan of. And out of full transparency, to be very honest with all of you, when I first saw Grace Wells Bonner's work like years and years ago, it didn't actually resonate with me because I almost felt like she was kind of trying to say what black masculinity should be. I don't think she still does this, by the way. And I just had a bone to pick with that because as a black person, I'm very much of the opinion that I don't like any sort of singular way of looking at black masculinity, because I think that is what happens to black people a lot. I think that black people sometimes, we aren't afforded the ability to be individuals. I think sometimes by society, we're always judged as a group. So I'm very against any kind of way of kind of characterizing black men or characterizing black people as a certain way. And it kind of, to me, at the start, seemed like she was trying to offer a vision of what black masculinity or black menswear should look like. Which I was like, I don't know if I'm a fan of that. And it kind of reminds me of, if you guys remember, there was this time when Lola designed this white dress and it had a bullet hole. And I remember a lot of the critics at the time were saying that the bullet hole is a commentary on police brutality and stuff like that. And then Lola came out in an interview and she was like, no, actually the inspiration was, actually about the horrific feeling of falling in love and then having your heart broken, right? And it's very funny because, and I put it on the screen just now, just for context, but it's very funny because this is what I mean by black people aren't afforded the ability to be individuals. We're always kind of put in boxes. And so that's kind of why Grace Wells Bonner's work didn't resonate with me at the start. But I think with time, as I've gotten to really understand her work and I've really gotten into her work, I think with time I've really started to understand what she's trying to do, and I can see clearly that she's not trying to do that. So I think with time I've become more and more of a fan of Grace Wells Bonner's work. So yeah, we don't want to promote this idea that all black people only eat chicken or listen to hip hop and all those kind of like reductive things that society likes to do to black people. But I'm not saying that Grace Wells Bonner does that, by the way. I think kind of her earlier work, the questions she was asking, I think were veering along those lines, but I don't think that she does that anymore, to be honest. But anyway, going back to the collection, I feel like I'm giving you guys a word vomit, but hey, that's why you guys tune into the live streams. Something I really love about this collection, and she's done this across multiple collections, is one, the styling is really nice. I love the styling. Two is she collaborated with the Savile Row tailors, Anderson and Shepherd, and they actually worked on a few of the looks in this collection. I'll show you guys when this runway video is finished. But it's really cool to actually have the Savile Row tailors kind of design their own looks and actually be involved in the collection, because I think a big thing of what she does is tailoring. Tailoring is really at the basis of a lot of what she does. Of course, there are these little elements, these embellishments that take inspiration from the diaspora, from African American histories. You have to really look deeper. You have to do your research to really get those references. But on the nose of what it is, you have Savile Row tailors making a lot of these looks. So I'm a big fan of that. And that's luxury. Even on the Anderson and Shepherd Instagram page, which I'll show you guys later, they tell you exactly what fabrics they're using and where the fabrics come from too. So you can actually like find out these things for yourself and actually trace them. And in a luxury fashion space where everyone is so secretive, no one wants to talk about where their stuff is produced or where their fabrics come from because they know that they're doing some shady shit, it's very nice to see a brand like Wells Bonner actually being transparent in that sense. Ewan Yu says, I'm actually going to give a presentation to my co-workers about this very idea. Not everything black people produce is about our trauma. Exactly. People see like one bullet hole or something that's like, oh my God, it must be a reference to slavery, or so. It's like there's just a very reductive way that people view black history and black culture. But I think that's mainly in the West that people do that though. Um, but yeah. But what do you guys think? I'm curious to get your thoughts on Grace Wells Bonner's work generally, if you have any thoughts, and what are your thoughts on this collection specifically? Someone is saying it's missing genuine experimentation. What type of experimentation are you looking to see, though? I'm just curious. What would be genuine experimentation to you? Because I think certain designers, like her aesthetic, like I said, the basis of it is tailoring. So for the most part, with her menswear, it starts with the suits and the jackets and, you know, the knitwear that's really chic. That's where it starts. Queen says, this collection is fine, but Spring Summer 25 disappointed me a lot. Why did it disappoint you? I'm just curious. Just out of curiosity. We're getting the finale of the show. You can see all the looks. But yeah, I was personally a fan of this show. I really liked how she was weaving the Howard archives and this kind of idea of like a collegiate uniform for a HBCU. I thought that was really cool. Also, you saw the continuation of the Adidas collab, which is very, very important in the Grace Wells Bonner world. What Wells Bonner is what the brand is called. I always say Grace Wells Bonner because I'm just used to saying it like that. But like Wells Bonner designed, for example, the Jamaican kit. I feel like it's only a matter of time before she has a really big break in fashion. I can see that a lot of people are resonating with her Adidas collabs, especially like the Sambas. We've seen like the silver ones, the sort of cheetah print ones. Those are like really, really big, and a lot of people love those online. So yeah, a lot of people are fans of those. I just put on the screen right now. Those are the looks that are designed by Anderson and Shepherd. They've actually put it on their Instagram page. Also, you can see in the description, they talk about what fabrics are used and where it's from. So you can see, for example, it says a double-breasted overcoat of mid-grey, and the fabric is made by Holland and Sherry Apparel. It's 27.5 ounces of 100% wool cloth of midnight blue, fine corded cloth. So yeah, I love this. But yeah, having Savile, when the basis of your clothing is tailoring and you're working with Savile Row tailors, I think that's a very, very commendable thing. Thalia says, I picked up a prep sweater from the Adidas collab because of this collection. That's interesting. Interesting. Zero ENG says, reminds me a bit of the Ralph Lauren one of a few years ago, but more modern. Joe says, I think the collections are most interesting when juxtapositions between these African and Caribbean and prep Americana are more front and center. Sometimes they're more an accent to a commercial show. That's a fair critique. That's actually a fair critique, to be fair. That is a fair critique in terms of, because I remember someone earlier saying that, I guess in a sense that sometimes these collections have very, very strong ideas behind them, but then on the surface, they're quite commercial, which I think is a fair critique, even though I'm a big fan of Wells Bonner, by the way. And these ideas of like the tension between these African Caribbean ideas, or, you know, the poet, or the she's literally in the past been inspired by many different writers and artists, and she doesn't bring the work front and center a lot of the time. I can see what you guys mean by that. I can see what you guys mean. Elle says, I like that she studies, but being disruptive or taking something well researched and deliberately doing something more experimental would be more fun, especially with the themes she explores. That's a fair critique. You guys are thinking today. I love this. I absolutely love this. You guys are thinking today. We're thinking today, guys. We're thinking today. I love that. I love that. Um, so yeah, that's the fall winter uh 14 show in a nutshell. I guess we can have a few closer looks at some of the looks on Vogue Runway just to kind of see some of these looks close up. Of course, the Savile Row tailoring. And once again, this going back to the Windrush generation, like a lot of them would wear kind of slightly wider trousers. So then when I look at her tailoring and I see that the trousers are wide, that's why my mind goes there almost immediately. That's really cool. Elle says prep is not my style at all. Interesting. I mean, so many designers have done like preppy, collegiate stuff. Like a big one that comes to mind is Raf Simons. Raf Simons did so many of those kind of collections when he was at Calvin Klein. You saw the Yale stuff, the University of California stuff, like all that sort of stuff. We saw that with Raf Simons at Calvin Klein. So yeah, it's an idea and it's a theme that many designers have explored. But yeah, it's cool. This is why I love doing the live streams, by the way, because it's always very interesting seeing, how you guys interpret these things as well. It's kind of like a group review, even though I'm saying my thoughts. Someone is asking, is there some connection to the Zoot suit? I can imagine, based on where Grace Wells Bonner's ideas come from, I can see how some of her silhouettes might take inspiration from the Zoot suit. But if you're talking about the Windrush generation and how they dressed, I don't think that there isn't the connection there. There's not that same connection there. I also love the styling of Wales Bonner a lot of the time. I just absolutely love the styling. And this like pea coat with this like detailing is really nice. Yeah, really. Oh, I love the styling on these. And these boots, these kind of like boxy boots, I'm a big fan. And knowing Wales Bonner, there are probably embellishments somewhere. Or maybe there's different iterations where there's loads of embellishments on the footwear. Like, see, spoke too soon. Spoke way too soon. She loves an embellishment. And Wales Bonner makes a lot of good footwear outside of the collabs. I think people sleep on Wales Bonner footwear. I remember one of my friends, he has these Wales Bonner like clogs or mules, and they are so nice. So damn nice. I think people sleep on the footwear. People definitely sleep on the footwear. Yeah, like someone is saying, the Zoot suits are earlier and American, exactly, which is why I said that. With Grace Wells Bonner's inspiration points, I could see how she could be inspired by that. But there's no real direct connection between the Windrush generation, tongue twister, and the Zoot suits. And, like the black jazz scene and how that whole thing started. So, yeah. Queen says these looks have a lot of textures. Talia says, I'm waiting for the ballet sneakers from her main brand to get to secondhand. Damn. Damn. Someone is saying, I don't see much that is Windrush coded about these designs. It's the silhouette. Like, it's the Grace Wells Bonner silhouette of tailoring in general is very Windrush coded. Like, if you just look across all her collections and you look at how it's shaped, you'll start to see it. It's not like the main inspiration of this collection is not Windrush. It's just an ongoing theme. It's very much like say Martine Rose, who we're going to talk about later. Martine Rose is heavily inspired by a very specific time in British history. It's kind of like the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, but mainly the early 2000s and the 90s. So her tailoring, the boxy tailoring, is very much inspired by that time and what she was seeing. So even if she doesn't say it, like, oh, this is how the tailoring is, and it's inspired by this time period. If you know where her inspiration points always come from, you can see that as an ongoing theme across her collections. So that's kind of the case with Wells Bonner. It's not like it's the only inspiration in terms of silhouettes, but it's definitely a big one. But anyway, I think we should move on to Wells Bonner's next collection, which was the Spring Summer 25 menswear collection. Let me see if I can get the video on the screen. Actually, that would be a lot better to watch. Okay, just making sure it's on the screen. So yeah, so talking about the Spring Summer 25 collection, once again, show notes, you can find them on Show Studio. And this collection is titled Midnight Palms. There's a big celebration of the work of the Trinidadian artist and textile designer called Althea McNish. She's actually very, very famous. She's widely regarded as one of the first internationally prominent Caribbean fashion designers in history. She's produced textiles for the likes of Christian Dior. She designed fabrics for Queen Elizabeth II. Queen Elizabeth II wore a lot of her fabrics when she was on her Caribbean tour. And Althea McNish has this very vibrant color scheme in a lot of her artwork. A lot of it is, I remember watching like one of her old interviews that she did where she was talking about the fact that she missed home a lot when she was in the UK. And so that's what led her to have all these like really vibrant colors and floral print in her artwork. And so you see a few bits of her artwork on some of the looks in this collection. You also see in the show notes, she was talking about this idea that, there's a kind of like a wardrobe. She's presenting a wardrobe inspired by kind of like what people would wear at night in a city that's by the sea. So that's why you have these nautical influences. That's why you see things like nylon anoraks or, swimwear that's kind of been made more chic, or you see like these striped knitwear pieces or these crocheted pieces. We also, once again, like I said, across many other collections, there was a collaboration with Anderson and Shepherd that continued in this collection. They designed a few of the looks in this collection too. I did like some of the styling of these looks. I'm definitely not, I wouldn't say I'm the biggest fan of this collection. Okay, here we can see one of the artwork pieces from Althea McNish. Just to kind of show you guys where the references are. But yeah, I definitely prefer the previous collection to this collection personally. But I want to know what you guys think. Queen is saying it's Miu Miu Spring Summer 24. Damn. Someone is saying children of Windrush didn't wear those silhouettes. That's very much my grandparents. I'm Caribbean background. I never said children of Windrush. I'm talking about the Windrush generation themselves. I'm not talking about the Windrush generation. Like there's many reference images that you can look at of the Windrush generation. They're literally all over the internet. And Grace Wells Bonner has said it herself that is one of her inspiration points. Don't take it from me. Take it from her. She said it. Don't take it from me. Like, read her interviews and she said it herself. Don't take it from me. But yeah, what do you guys think about this collection, by the way? Like I said, I prefer the previous collection, but curious to hear your thoughts. Let's see what someone is saying. I love Wells Bonner, but even she has a very complex process for the clothes. The result is still normal clothes. So I guess an ongoing theme with what you guys are saying is that her the depth of her research, which is actually very deep, doesn't show in the final product of the clothes, because the final product of the clothes ends up looking very commercial, which I think is actually a very good critique. My question back to you guys, the audience, would be, is that necessarily a bad thing? Because I feel like some designers, they can't find a perfect balance, in the sense that if their clothing is too commercial, people say it's commercial. If it's too experimental, people say it's too experimental. So if a good example is Craig Green, who has very experimental clothing. We just looked at his collection, and in the chat, I could see a lot of people saying that his work is too experimental and it's to his detriment. So you see what I'm saying? Like, you can't really... Where's the middle ground? Where does someone win where it's the perfect balance between doing all this research and it's showing, but also not being too experimental? Cornbo says, the artwork could have been produced as an entirely new textile instead of just a print. That would have been interesting. That's a cool idea. But yeah, I'm curious to get your thoughts on what the perfect middle ground is, because I do think that it can be hard to reach that middle ground where it's like damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of thing. I want to see the receipts. I love that name, by the way. I chose Martine because of her impact on menswear as a whole. She's the blueprint on contemporary menswear while also working to push those boundaries. That's cool. That's cool. Someone is saying the clothes look very European, well-tailored, nicely styled, but Caribbean I don't really see. That's odd. Like, I know you're saying you're Caribbean. Obviously, I'm not Caribbean. However, one, I've actually been to the Caribbean. Two, I grew up around Caribbeans. Like, I grew up around Jamaicans my whole life. That was actually my childhood. Like, the Caribbean aesthetic, like, what is a Caribbean aesthetic? Because when I say that she's inspired by the Windrush generation, which she said herself, by the way, don't take my word for it, like I've said, the Windrush generation, they were wearing Western suits. They weren't wearing they weren't wearing what is a Caribbean silhouette of a suit. They're very much wearing a British tailoring silhouette. They just used to style it in a certain way that made it distinctive. So when you say that you're not seeing any Caribbean silhouettes or whatever that is, I don't even know what you mean by that. Genuinely. Let's see some more of the comments. I think the problem is when you try to make avant-garde clothing for normal people like Craig Green does, for experimental to work, you need a kind of world building for people who are already alternative. That's a cool take. Elle says, I guess she just needs to dial it up a bit on the experimental side. Madam Kim, at the end of the day, the clothes have to sell. So can we blame designers if they are on the side of commercial? That's a good question to ask, to be honest. Cornbo says, I want to see a study on commercialization and how it correlates with the state of the economy. That's actually like a thing that's been studied already. Like when we're in times of financial crisis, clothing becomes a lot more pragmatic, and so designs in general become more commercial. So yeah, because people don't have money to buy frivolous things anymore. So everything in general becomes pragmatic, and fashion follows suit. I can see someone was saying it looks like Miu Miu. I think it's kind of like Miu Miu swimwear is like a big thing. I remember in the last live stream we saw that you know, the biggest products, like top 10 products, we have a lot of like Miu Miu swimwear in those products. And the ballet flats are also kind of like the Miu Miu effect. However, Grace Wells Bonner has done those kind of ballet flats before. This isn't the first time. So I wouldn't necessarily say that it's like Miu Miu coded. I can see if you see the similarities. But yeah, I wouldn't say it's all the way like that or like all the way the same, to be honest. Also, just to show you guys on the screen, the looks that were designed by Anderson and Shepherd. This is their Instagram once again, showing you guys what they designed. So yeah, you can see some of the looks that they worked on. So yeah, it's great to see the Savile Row tailors involved a lot in her brand. Okay, so let's see what Rugob, is that how to pronounce your name, by the way? Rugob. I love that name, by the way. So Rugob is saying, oh, but Ayo, it was in the styling. Also, the lack of color. When I look at Oswald Boateng, it's steeped in his culture. Grace Wells Bonner, not so much. Just saying. People keep talking about color. Like, the Windrush generation, like, I've gone to so many... and I know, first of all, I know people from the Windrush generation. Like, my friend who I grew up with, his grandmother was part of the Windrush generation. Like, I literally grew up around her. When they first, I don't want to say they, that sounds kind of weird. But anyway, when the Windrush generation first came to the UK, if you look at the tailoring that they were wearing, it wasn't that colorful. I don't know where people get this idea that their tailoring was ultra colorful and they were just mixing mad colors. Like, that definitely wasn't the case. That happened later. And the person that really helped to cement that, if we're talking about like tailoring history or just British tailoring in general, was actually, like you mentioned, Oswald Boateng. Oswald Boateng was one of the first Savile Row tailors to start mixing weird colors and weird fabrics, because obviously it's inspired by his Ghanaian heritage and the fact that in Ghana, they wear crazy prints and patterns that are really nice, and they like to wear color in West Africa. So he kind of wanted to infuse that energy into tailoring and didn't understand why British tailoring had to be a monolith. And Oswald Boateng got so much hate when he did that. And it's only now in hindsight, when people look back, that they say, oh, Oswald Boateng is a legend, and you know, he changed the face of British tailoring, even down to, you know, tiny things like Oswald Boateng would make lapels stupidly skinny, like stupidly thin, which is kind of fun. I liked it. But British tailoring is more boxy, the lapels are bigger, the style of the trousers are wider. Oswald Boateng made the trousers slimmer. Oswald Boateng obviously brought the color in, the lapels were smaller, so the fabrics were different also. So, you know, it's definitely him that like really cemented that thing. I think that Caribbeans wear a lot of color, obviously, in Caribbean like street style and stuff like that. There's a lot of color in it. But if we're talking specifically tailoring Windrush generation, that's where we're talking about like color. If we're talking like streetwear styling and how Caribbeans at the time were looked from a streetwear perspective, then yes, Caribbeans wore loads of color. But Caribbeans weren't going to church wearing bright yellow suits. That just wasn't what was happening at that time. Cornbo is asking, I wonder if the coats are lined. That's actually a very valid question, actually. Very, very valid. Very, very valid. And I think also there's also like there's a deeper conversation that I don't want to go into because we're talking about Grace Wells Bonner. We can have like a whole deeper conversation, I guess, on another time in terms of like Caribbeans in the UK street style, which definitely obviously was a lot of color that people wore. But so going back to my point about the Windrush generation, this is the last point I'll make about it, then I'll move on. So a big reason why a lot of the tailoring of the Windrush generation at the time wasn't colorful, even though like what Caribbeans used to wear inherently was very colorful in the way that they used to style things, is because a lot of Caribbeans, when they came to the UK, they were trying to assimilate. So especially when it came to like work stuff and like working in like jobs and in certain places, they would wear the typical suits that British people would wear in terms of color and like fabric choices, because they didn't want to do things that would seem as if they're not assimilating into the culture. And I've read so many books about this, by the way, about like kind of like the mental effects of people by having to assimilate and almost like giving away parts of their culture just so that they could be accepted in the UK. So that's like a deeper conversation to have about like the way that Caribbean tailoring used to look. Because I know someone in the chat was saying that Caribbeans didn't go to Savile Row. You don't need to go to Savile Row to find a grey suit. Most people don't even go to Savile Row now. And if you go to London and you go into the underground in like the work hours, like 9 a.m, like just peak hours, almost everyone is wearing like a navy or a black or some sort of like charcoal, grey suit. And 99.9% of people wearing suits in the morning in London don't go to Savile Row. So I don't know why the person brought up Savile Row, maybe because obviously Grace Osborne is collaborating with Anderson and Shepherd, but that has nothing to do with like what Caribbeans were wearing. Like Savile Row is so separated from Caribbean street style. It's not even part of it. Someone said we're dwindling in the number in the UK. Got to keep the history factual from our mouths. The end. So you mean to tell me that the suits that the Windrush generation wore were all colourful? That's just not true. I'm sorry. I can't agree with you. I just won't agree with you. That's just not true. Like, you look at the reference images, you talk to people from the generation, which I grew up around people who are from the Windrush generation, literally. So yeah, that's just not true. If you're talking about the way people used to style themselves, like street style into different places, yes. But if we're talking about like the business casual style, then no. So yeah, we can agree to disagree on that one. But that's Grace Wales Bonner in a nutshell. Like I was saying, I'm definitely a big fan of her work. I think that she is she's on the cusp of being mainstream. I don't know would you guys say that Grace Wales Bonner is mainstream yet? I don't think so. But I remember when the Louis Vuitton collection was up for grabs, people put names forward like Grace Wales Bonner and Martine Rose, and the fact that her name was there shows that there are a lot of people that want to see Grace Wales Bonner at the top of fashion. Even I saw part of the discourse when we were talking about Chanel. A lot of people were saying that Grace Wales Bonner should go to Chanel. I think a lot of people want to put her forward for those things, but I think she's on the cusp, definitely. And I like the fact that she designed the Jamaican football kit. I actually like that kit, by the way. I think she's slowly growing, and I think it's a matter of time before we see like her have a big break in fashion, to be honest. Even down to like the celebrities she styles. A lot of celebrities seem to resonate with her work and they wear it. There's people like Solange that obviously wear Grace Wales Bonner. So yeah, really, really cool. And I like kind of looking into her ideas. Grace Wales Bonner actually reminds me of J.W. Anderson in the sense that when I have to review a Wales Bonner collection or I have to look deeply, I always learn something, because in the process of finding out what her research was, I have to research her research in a sense. So then you start learning about these different things that happened in history. It's very similar to J.W. Anderson, because I think that J.W. Anderson does that very well too. J.W. Anderson will do research on very obscure things that make me have to research the research, and then I learn about those things that he's referencing too, which is very, very interesting. It's really, really good. So yeah, that's Grace Wales Bonner in a nutshell. Of course, like I said earlier, Jonathan Anderson is also on the list of designers, but I'm going to skip him because I feel like we talk about him all the time. He's in 3 categories in the awards. And, I think he's definitely... What I think about JW Anderson in terms of like this award, like British Menswear Designer of the Year, is that, I don't know. I feel like he is definitely in the running for Designer of the Year. But if he doesn't win it, I can see how they'll just put him for this one instead. Or make sure that he wins at least one. Because it'll be weird for him to be nominated for 3 awards and then not win any. So I can see how they would probably give him at least one of those. So if not Designer of the Year, probably going to be Women's Wear Designer or Menswear Designer. One of. Definitely one of. Queen says she needs to continue her work. Curious how she will excite us in her further collections. Very interesting. Joe says mainstream, not really. It's just that the industry is pressed for designers that can actually put out consistently good work. Leah says collabs maybe, especially shoes. The football kit collabs are mainstream UK, but she is ascending. I guess that's mainly because like in the UK, obviously, there's a big Jamaican population. Also in the US, in places like New York. So that's why the Jamaican kit would be popular in those places. And obviously in the Caribbean itself. But yeah, I'd like to see Wells Bonner, go mainstream. That would be great. Yeah, I think we just need more designers with a different perspective from the usual. I know I talk about this all the time, but I'll talk about it again in terms of like the fact that how a lot of designers, and it's not even a Western thing, because even in the West or in Europe, European history is so deep, is so vast, is so interesting, is so layered that I don't understand how a lot of designers end up referencing the same, brutalist architecture, the pre-Raphaelites, and I'm like, do you know how vast European history is? Why do you guys always do the cliche thing and reference the most cliche things ever? And so that's what I really appreciate about Grace Wells Bonner in this fashion landscape, because her inspiration points are coming from completely different angles to what we see usually in fashion. So I commend her for that. And it also makes me very interested in her work. Like every time I see her work, I'm always interested to study it and study the inspiration points behind it, because it's more interesting than, seeing another collection about brutalism. You know what I mean? But yeah, moving on. Since we're skipping JW Anderson, the next designer is Kiko Kostadinov, which should actually be a lot of fun, because I haven't talked about Kiko Kostadinov in a very long time. I think the last time that I mentioned Kiko or did a full review on a Kiko show was all the way back for Spring Summer 20, when I reviewed his Spring Summer 20 collection on my channel. You guys can check that out if you want. And obviously, as part of that review, I talked about his workwear inspired collections before. The Spring Summer 20 collection, that was the collection that was inspired by the Kentucky Derby, if I'm remembering correctly. So that was where you had him kind of like designing different uniforms of like the jockeys that you would see, and kind of creating tailoring around those kind of silhouettes. And it was very, very interesting. And it's very interesting because talking about this collection that I'm going to talk about first, which is the Fall Winter 24 menswear collection, normally with Kiko collections, you see that there's kind of like a theme. Like I was saying, with the Spring Summer 20, you see the Kentucky Derby, the jockey uniforms, clothes of the people attending and kind of how they look. And there's always a theme. It's either like a time period or a theme that Kiko Kostadinov is very inspired by. But in this collection, funny enough, he said that rather than focusing on themes like he usually does, or like a time period or an event, he actually just wanted to, kind of reference himself and also build a body of work that can then develop slowly. So he's almost like going in the direction of like a Rick Owens or Yohji Yamamoto, where they have a very distinctive aesthetic style silhouette and they're kind of building on it season on season. And to quote him directly on what he said about this, he said, it's kind of like building a new language and claiming space rather than changing every season. So I kind of like the idea. I think that Kiko Kostadinov has gotten to a point in his career where his design language is so strong, and unlike what I was saying with JW Anderson, I can see a Kiko pair of trousers and know it's Kiko from a mile away. Like, I can see a Kiko jacket and without even knowing what collection it's from and know, oh, that's Kiko. The same way I could not know what collection a Rick Owens jacket is from and look at it and be like, yeah, that's Rick Owens. And I think when you get to that point, I can see how it makes a lot more sense for you to kind of then do the thing where you're building on your collections, collection by collection, and slowly building that way rather than doing a complete 180, which Kiko has done many times before when he's looking at different reference points for the collection. Like I said, show notes, you can find those on Show Studio. But we can go through like some of the looks here, because what this collection actually reminds me of, and I like the way it looks aesthetically. I've always been a fan of the Kiko Kostadinov aesthetic. I'm actually quite sad that none of the trousers fit me, because I think that Kiko Kostadinov does really good trousers. Something I also really appreciate about Kiko's brand is the pattern making. As someone, because that's my specialty, like I used to make patterns. The pattern making in Kiko's clothing is actually insane. I think it's very underrated, and it actually shocks me sometimes that no one talks about pattern making when we talk about Kiko Kostadinov. It's really, really good. I also love what he does every season, where he does like the darting on the garment, and it's supposed to be shaped like a K, which is a K for Kiko Kostadinov, of course. But this collection just reminds me of a lot of old Kiko Kostadinov collections I've seen in the past, which is kind of the point of it, right? It's kind of like cementing your aesthetic and then building on it slowly, which he then did in the collection after. Literally, like, this look 42 reminds me of, even the colorway is almost exactly the same as one of the first Kiko collections. You know, the early Kiko collections that were heavily workwear inspired and really commercial? And they had this like maroon tone. So this stuff was really, really cool. Yeah, I like it. But once again, in terms of like themes and ideas, they're kind of ones I've seen before from Kiko, aesthetically and intellectually. So while I love the collection, there isn't really much for at least me personally to discuss, but I'm curious from an aesthetic point of view what you guys liked about this collection, if you liked it or what you don't, and what your thoughts are on Kiko Kostadinov in general. Are you guys a fan of kind of like the workwear Kiko Kostadinov aesthetic, or are you not? What do you guys think about it? Sock2 says, Daniel Fabara, the graphic designer, came in and kind of switched up the brand. Used to be more techie and workwear. Yeah, exactly. Let's see what guys are saying. True, patterns are crazy. Yeah, that's definitely the case when it comes to Kiko Kostadinov's work. Rugob says, I love this early 2000s looking website. It's fun to scroll. Laura and Deanna Fanning also do this world building, tailored fairies, I'd call it. Yeah, you know what? I think on Discord, and by the way, if you guys aren't part of the Discord, definitely join, because we talk about fashion every single day and I'm involved in the conversations as well on Discord. The link to the Discord should be in the description of the live stream. One of the conversations we had recently, and maybe we can have this conversation too on live stream, is what do you guys think of the twins, like the sisters, Laura and Deanna Fanning, versus Kiko, because obviously they do the women's wear, Kiko does the men's wear. People were having a conversation whether they've kind of like surpassed Kiko in terms of like what part of the Kiko Kostadinov brand has the most interest, garners the most interest, or what part of the brand are people most interested in. So I'm very curious to know what you guys think. Like, do you guys think that they've taken over and they have the more interesting side of the brand, or do you guys think that Kiko and his menswear is still overshadowing what they're doing with the women's wear collections? But we had a long discussion about that on Discord. Sock2 is saying you should check out his recent collection in DSM. Yeah, it's funny. I actually have a tab open because obviously he had the collaboration with Levi's that I wanted to talk about. But right now on the screen is like the stuff that he's selling at DSM right now. Some of it, like once again, the world building from this collection, like this jacket here, this Chalice jacket. But yeah, I've always just loved like Kiko's what I like. Kiko is the kind of brand that everything he makes, damn near, I would buy. The only problem is that it doesn't fit. I just love the shape of it. And that goes back to the pattern making and the actual shape. Like, I think sometimes people do this thing on fashion. If it's not like insanely abstract, people are just like, oh, it's commercial, so it's boring. But for me, it's the shapes of Kiko that just get me going all the time. It's just insane. Sock2 says, the twins are doing good stuff. Obviously, I prefer the menswear since I'm a male, but since fashion is more popular within the ladies, it's only a matter of time, I guess. Michael Solano says, to be honest, the twins have been on a roll compared to Kiko. Rugob says, it kind of looks harmonious to me, like the same person could have done both sides. Really? Do you know what I'm going to say about that, actually? I do agree with you, definitely. I think that that's definitely the case now. I remember there was a time, especially when they first started designing the women's wear, where they looked completely different. And I remember at the time, because I have a few friends that are like big Kiko fans, and I remember us having the conversation years ago about how like disjointed the women's wear and menswear looked. But I think with time, they've kind of found a way to kind of, work together with it and kind of make a cohesive look that makes the menswear and women's wear kind of look more cohesive and more harmonious, like you said. But at the start, it definitely wasn't like that. It was like, yeah, it was really different. Like, I remember, because that was the time when a lot of the Kiko Kostadinov Asics collabs started to become big. And then the women's wear collabs kind of looked like those Asics sandals that were like in insane colors. So the women's wear colorways were like bright yellow, bright red, bright green. And the menswear was kind of like gray, maroon. Like, it was completely different. The blue key left says, to be honest, I see them as two brands under one name. The twin stuff is very popular in like Pinterest pics and social media. It's very, very pretty and fun to look at. That's cool. But yeah, like I said, I'm a big fan of Kiko. If it fit me, oh my God, I would wear all of it. Unfortunately, it doesn't fit me. So that's why I end up buying Yoji and Rick Owens instead. But the second Kiko starts making clothing that's more fit for taller people, I shall be buying it until no end. So yeah, those are my thoughts. Moving on to the next collection, which of course is the Spring Summer 25 menswear collection. The show notes are quite short, so I can read them out if you guys want. I'll put them on the screen right now. But essentially, just before I read the show notes, just for context, this collection kind of took inspiration from kind of like the uniforms of researchers. So like different kinds of professions like doctors, researchers, caretakers, patients, kind of all these things, because Kiko Kostadinov, which I'll get into, was talking about this idea of how we kind of look at things like hospitals and clinics and labs as these places that like provoke fear. They're kind of like these places where, people are dying and people are trying to make them get better, or like labs where they're cooking up some like crazy evil stuff like making chemicals and weapons and stuff like that. And kind of like this idea that we shouldn't look at it from a sense of fear, but we should look at it from a sense of like, you know, improvement. Like you actually go to the hospital because your health is being improved, or, you know, labs, they make medicine that actually cures people's diseases or actually like helps people. So to read the show notes, it says, human fragility and innovation coexist in hospitals, clinics, and laboratories, places that provoke fear in many, yet where the past and the future collide in moments of great beauty. As theatres of birth and death, regeneration and degeneration, these sanctuaries require both intimacy with and protection from the body, inspiring the abstract thought process of the Kiko Kostadinov Spring-Summer 25 men's collection. So that's exactly where the Kiko collection starts from. So those kind of ideas are interwoven once again into what Kiko was saying in the collection before, where he was saying that it's kind of like this idea of like having a Kiko Kostadinov signature and building on it slowly. So if you look at the looks through this collection, you then see these same Kiko signatures that we're always used to seeing. The workwear inspired stuff, you know, the military inspired looks like this with the shoulders, and kind of like building on that. So yeah, but once again, the pattern making, phenomenal. I always love that from Kiko. Like you look at like the darting, how they do that, the trousers, my gosh, like Kiko designs a good trouser. Don't know what happened there, but yeah, Kiko designs a damn good trouser. There are people arguing about Grace Wells Bonner in the chat. People are having a heated Grace Wells Bonner argument in the chat. Oh my God. But anyway, to quote Kiko about this collection, he had a really interesting quote in his interview with Vogue that I want to read out because I thought it was very interesting. He said, I listened to this podcast that talked about how you can now live until 90, but that you don't know how your final years may be. It's health span, not lifespan. You have to do a lot of work way in advance when you're in your 30s or 40s if you want to have some enjoyable last few years. And once again, that's kind of looking at it from a different, instead of looking at it from a sense of fear or a sense of, you know, like death with a hospital, you can look at these elements with a sense of preservation and an elongation of someone's lifespan, those kind of things. So that was very, very interesting. And like conceptually, like you do see these kind of like long, kind of like lab coat looking looks. So yeah, I think it was a cool collection. I definitely prefer the collection before, but it's very cool. But to be honest, when I look at Kiko collections, I don't really view them based on the like intellectual references or that sort of stuff. I think what I appreciate most about Kiko's brand, to be very honest, is the pattern making and the tailoring. That to me is the main focus, and that's why I love it, to be honest. That's why I'm a big fan of the brand. Sock2 is saying we're on Kiko now. Stop arguing about Wells Bonner. I do, as much as, you know, people are opinionated about different things, I do think that in a way it's kind of a good thing that people are so passionate about fashion in the chat that people are having heated arguments about these brands. I think if anything, that's a good thing. It shows that you guys are very engaged. We're all engaged together, so it's a good thing. But kind of what Sock2 is saying, we are talking about Kiko right now. Joe Heffen says, I think the menswear is best when it's doing this kind of hybrid of tailoring / formal wear and tech wear. Sometimes it's a bit too rainbow gorp core button party. That, I can see what you mean by that. I can definitely see what you mean by that. I think it just depends what you like. My favorite Kiko looks are always the looks that are tailored and kind of have more techie fabrics. Those are the looks that I enjoy the most from Kiko's brand. I don't like because Kiko sometimes likes to use like really soft fabrics. that flow in a way that I personally don't like. They're not my personal taste. But those looks resonate with people a lot, actually. There's a lot of people that buy that stuff, which is why Kiko continues to make it. But yeah, my favorite looks from Kiko is when he does the more workwear, tech wear, mixed with tailoring kind of thing. That's what I like. And I like Kiko's knitwear too. Those are the pieces that I like. Damn, they're still arguing. Sock 2, because I know Sock 2 is our resident Kiko Kostadinov lover. What did you think about the Levi's collab? I'm just curious to get your opinion. What did you think about the Levi's collab? And I think it sold well, at least on the website. From last time I checked the Kiko website, some stuff was actually sold out. So I'm curious to know from a Kiko fan, like what you think about the Levi's collab. Did it resonate with you, and what did you think about it? Someone is saying Kiko's women's wear is way better. I really love the dye on these pieces from the Levi's collab, by the way. Like, really nice dye. Let me go on Kiko's website because I'm just curious. Like, I remember checking and seeing that a lot of it like was selling really well. Okay, this is some of the stuff from the Levi's collab. Trousers. Okay, yeah, so I was right. A lot of the menswear looks are sold out, and then the women's wear looks aren't. So this darted jacket is sold out. This is a cool jacket. Damn. That is fire. And then what's the other piece that sold out? The trousers too. Levi's articulate knee trouser. So these sold out. And then the looks that we saw on DSM, these are still in stock, and the other ones were pieces. So that's interesting to know. Oh wow, so Sock 2 even says I think the women's is better. Damn, you heard it from a Kiko stan. And of course Kiko has had this ongoing collaboration with ASICS forever. That's been hugely successful. That's a story in and of itself because, you know, I remember around the time that Kiko Kostadinov started working with ASICS, it was such a great thing because very few designers get creative freedom at sportswear brands. These sportswear brands don't like to take a lot of risk. It's why you had the likes of Kanye West, who was working with Nike, ended up going to Adidas where he can make his own silhouettes. Or it's why sometimes a lot of designers, when they do collabs with sportswear companies, it's really uninteresting. For an uninteresting collaboration, for example, is like Jacques Mus and Nike. You just take the Air Max 1 silhouette and change the swoosh slightly, and that's the collab. It's like very bare bones. Whereas with Kiko and ASICS, they actually let him make his own silhouette from the ground up, and it became so successful. So that's also a success story to talk about on another day. That's, yeah, really, 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 really good. Sock2 says, again, I agree with Ayo. Kiko at his best is when he does conceptual tailoring combined with interesting fabrics. It can be spenny at times, but the fabrics are just so damn good sometimes. Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree. But shout out to Kiko, because I do realize that even though I really like Kiko's work, I almost don't talk about him enough. So this is even a catalyst to add him to my list when I'm always doing my Fashion Week recaps. I'll definitely be reviewing his shows moving forward because, yeah, I'm a fan. I'm definitely a fan. Now, moving on, like I said, Kim Jones is also another designer I won't talk about because for similar reasons to J.W. Anderson, we talk about Kim Jones all the time. I review damn near every Kim Jones Dior collection. I feel like all of you are very familiar with his work at this point, so there isn't really much of a point to, keep beating a dead horse. But what do you guys, I guess before we move on, what do you guys think about Kim Jones in the context of this award? Do you guys think he will win versus Martine Rose, J.W. Anderson, Grace Wales Bonner, Kiko Kostadinov, Craig Green? Do you guys think he'll win? See what you guys are saying in the chat. Wait, someone is saying that the Jacquemus Air Max 1 silhouette looks different. I don't think it looks different. I could be wrong, by the way. I don't have an issue with being wrong, but really? As far as I know, the Jacquemus collab is an Air Max 1. And basically the Air Max 1 on the side, it normally has that like big swoosh that's like coming out of the back side. Like it does that on both sides. And with the Jacquemus collab, what they did is they removed that big swoosh, and in the same area where that swoosh would be, they made it small. Like the front panel is the same, the sole is the same, it has the same air bubble. But I could be wrong though. And like I said, I don't have an issue with being wrong. Someone is saying Martine Rose got a win. She's been too hot. The Martine Rose shocks alone are enough. Kim Jones at Dior Men always has some heaters, but I don't know if he's going to win, not going to lie. Yeah, I totally agree. Kim Jones at Dior, he has some heat. Always cooking some heat. Does Comme des Garçons have original silhouettes with Nike? No. So Comme des Garçons, funny enough, so that's a good thing to bring up. Comme des Garçons, for guys that don't know, does multiple sneaker collabs with Nike every year. They're famously known for they unveil a Nike sneaker collab every Comme des Garçons Un Plus collection. Like every single one is a Nike collab there somewhere in the collection. And most times they either have an interesting take on an already existing Nike silhouette, or they help launch a Nike silhouette. So I'll give you an example of the two. So one of the sneakers I have is the Comme des Garçons Air Max 95s. Now they are the same silhouette as an Air Max 95s. It just is deconstructed on the outside. So it looks really interesting, but it's the same Air Max 95 silhouette, same sole, same everything. And they do the same with so many other sneakers. Or do you guys remember when the Nike Vapor Max released? Comme des Garçons actually helped launch it. So Comme des Garçons did a collaboration with Nike with the Vapor Max, and it looked exactly the same as the ordinary Vapor Max. The only difference was it had Comme des Garçons like written on the side of the shoe, like on the tongue, on part of the tongue, and that was it. So Comme des Garçons doesn't make their own silhouettes with Nike, but they sometimes edit silhouettes, or sometimes they help Nike launch certain sneakers. So Nike might do a collab with Comme des Garçons and put that sneaker out there and see the reception before they re-release it as a GR. So that happened. Yeah, people are saying they remember with the Vapor Max. So yeah, Comme des Garçons actually does a lot of different things with Nike actually. Someone's saying, please Kiko for the award. I'm catching up on the comments because I asked if you guys think Kim Jones would win. Interesting. Okay, someone is saying they changed the swoosh, the toe cap, and the bubble. The bubble on the Air Max 1, did they? I have to have a look after, because The only change on the bubble that I saw is that they expose different parts of it. Because like if you like the Air Max has a full length zoom. So that transparent bubble that comes out when you look at the design, the way they design it sometimes is they can expose different parts of it. So with the Jacquemus shoes, my understanding is that the part they expose makes it look like almost like a longer rectangle than the original Air Max 1s. But it's not like, once again, it's not that innovative. It's just like you can take I'm trying to think of like a popular shoe, like an Air Force One. Like you don't have to think very much to take an Air Force One, make the swoosh smaller, make the fabric leather, and then maybe make the laces thicker, change the eyelet slightly. Like that's very different to actually designing a whole new shoe entirely from the ground up, like what Kiko does at Asics or what Balenciaga do with a lot of their footwear and stuff like that. So that's kind of what I mean by there's not a lot of innovation. Like a lot of brands don't like to take a lot of risk. So when they do collabs, they always do all this stuff about, you know, you just change the shoe slightly, change the fabric, change the swoosh here, make the sole 1 centimeter thinner. To me, those are uninteresting collabs. So yeah. Someone is saying the bubble of the Air Max is not all over the outsole, it's just on the back. I'm talking about on the inside. Like, I literally saw it recently. Like, I went to I'm not sure if you guys have seen my Nike vlog where I went to the whole Nike Innovation Center. I actually filmed some of it, actually. Like, where they show you how the inside of the shoe looks. So if you guys see it, you'll see. Henry said bye because I'm not talking about Kiko anymore. That's funny. NGL says that the open mole for a shoe is expensive. It is expensive. It's extremely expensive to design your own footwear. That's 100% facts. Like very, very expensive. But these sportswear companies have loads of money. So there's no excuse. Because you can't tell me that Nike doesn't have more money than Asics. Or like Adidas doesn't have more money than Asics. So why is it that the companies that make less money invest more money into experimental footwear, like Asics, like Adidas, what they did with Yeezy and all that sort of stuff? So when you think about it, this is one of the reasons why Nike is going downhill. Like, I'm not sure if you guys have seen like the Nike stock price, the share price. I think that there's a lack of like innovation sometimes with Nike because they don't allow a lot of creative freedom, where that's where they get beaten by a lot of other companies. Like you can see how many companies are taking Nike market share. If we talk about running, you can look at the likes of Hoka, On Running. If you look at lifestyle, Adidas, Asics, they're all New Balance. They're all taking Nike's market share. But yeah, obviously that's a conversation for a different day. But yeah, that's a big reason why, in my opinion, they should be doing more interesting collabs. But hey, that's just me. That's just me. Moving on, the last designer we're talking about today is Martine Rose. Who is a designer that I talk about so damn much. I feel like it's a broken record. I think at this point, people know how I feel about Martine Rose. People know my thoughts about Martine Rose, about her work. If you guys aren't new here, you guys will know all the videos I've made about Martine Rose and her work. So I've even reviewed her Fall Winter 24 show, so I won't really talk about that. What I will talk about is the Spring Summer 25 show, which was actually really, really cool, really, really interesting. I put the show notes on the screen here. Essentially, what she talks about in the show notes is this idea of, challenging the idea of beauty and where we find beauty in the body and our ideas of where we find beauty. So one of the phrases that stood out to me in the show notes where she said she was creating a tension between mass market and niche beauty, which is very interesting because I remember on when the show happened, a lot of people were asking why people had those like weird noses, like why they had those massive noses. And in an interview, Martine Rose said that the first thing that you see when you look at people sometimes is their nose. And it's also something that people change about themselves. It's almost like the first thing that people change about themselves. So that's why she put a nose there, because she knew that it would be something that would make people feel uneasy, but also like look there. And it's also makes you think about like different beauty standards and like what nose is beautiful, or like what's the beauty standard as far as a nose. And there are also other elements in this show that were kind of made for people to kind of be a bit confused. She said in her interview with Vogue that she wanted the collection to look a bit messy and go against the expectations of what you would, you know, think of a show in Milan. That's why, let me bring the video back slightly actually, because it's a very important detail to look at. That's why the lighting in the show is really odd. Like some parts are lit and then other parts aren't. It's not like the normal runway show where they lit things evenly, because they want the, you know, the video after to look really chic and the lighting has to be on point. She's just got lights going all over the place. So you might see the details clearer, or you might not. It just depends where you're sitting. And that adds to part of the chaos. This collection actually reminded me of that old Martine Rose collection, the one that had a very similar tailoring aesthetic with the ties and the really, really wide trousers. I'm trying to remember what season it was. But this collection really, really reminded me of that. Some of them are even wearing wigs once again. Last Dragon said, her brain, that's funny. Someone's asking me what season this is. This is Spring Summer 25, by the way. This is the Martine Rose Spring Summer 25. Train spotting had to have informed her perspective a lot. Oh my God, I can see that actually. That's a good spot. I can actually see that. That's a really good spot. I feel like I'm so behind in the chat. High Life Cowboy is asking the one in the market. Yeah, I think that was the one. It was like, I can't remember what it was. Maybe like Seven Sisters, like some market in Seven Sisters or something like that, is where it was. But yeah, I always love her collections. Of course, when we talk about Martine Rose, and I know earlier someone was saying, in terms of when I was asking who should win and someone said Martine Rose, they were saying that because Martine Rose's aesthetic has kind of been used and abused across the industry. And I totally agree in that sense, that her aesthetic and her silhouette that she's been building over the years has been adopted by a lot of different designers. Even like this is a very interesting, where we know that Martine Rose has very boxy tailoring, but she's mixing boxy tailoring with very small lapels. Normally, when people have this really boxy tailoring, they normally have larger lapels than this. So she's like playing with different elements even within her tailoring, right? But yeah, aesthetically similar to what we've known from Martine, the boxy tailoring, you know, the square toe loafers. At this point, I think it's kind of like a uniform wardrobe. She also has these kind of very witty takes on sportswear, which I absolutely love. I'll show you guys what I'm talking about, by the way, because I know that sometimes I talk about these things in general terms because I just assume that people know what I'm talking about. But because I'm a big sports fan, so when she has these like witty inspirations, I can see it immediately. Like a good example is from her Fall Winter 24 collection. Now, for football fans know about this moment. This is Balotelli, Why Always Me. This was when Manchester City were in the Manchester derby. They were playing against Manchester United. Balotelli scored. He lifted up his shirt that said, "Why always me?" Now, this is one of the most iconic celebrations in football. Reason being, Balotelli used to get into so much trouble. For as good as a football player he was, he always used to find his way into the tabloids. He's either crashing his car, or he turns up to training late, or he turns up to training drunk, or he's been clubbing all night and he gets into a fight. You know, it's just, there's always an issue with with Mario Balotelli. There was always an issue back then when he was playing for Manchester City. And the British football media is harsh. They will, if they find the tiniest thing they can criticize you for, they will critique the life out of you. And so this moment when he lifted up his shirt after scoring and say, you know, "Why always me?" It's just iconic, because if you have the context of how just like insane this guy was, like Mario Balotelli, it's funny. And so Martine Rose will make a football jersey, but then she will make like something like this, where this is called the Celebration Football Top. And maybe I have to get this up on her website, but it also has a back panel, so you can lift it up and you can mimic that gesture of Mario Balotelli lifting up his shirt over his head when he did the "Why always me?" And so Martine Rose has these little like design cues in her work, across her work, where the tailoring at first looks simple, but then you see the patterns and then you see where the references are coming from. I want to see if I can go on her website if she has that jersey, so that we can see the panel that I'm talking about, just so I can show you guys the back panel. Someone said he's the Dennis Rodman of football. Kind of. Although I feel like Balotelli was more polarizing than Dennis Rodman, because Balotelli really used to get into that much trouble. Like, Balotelli was a nuisance. Balotelli was literally a nuisance. So like, this is stuff like this. So that's the thing with Martine Rose. Martine Rose the reason she makes football jerseys is because, as I've spoken many times on this channel, Martine Rose is inspired by like her own nostalgia growing up. It's her sister dressing up a certain way and going to, garage dances that she couldn't go to, and how people used to dress back then. And it's looking at, the business casual workwear, and also the business casual suits that people used to wear going to work in the 90s. And it's also the sportswear that people would wear going to raves in London, and how that sportswear would look. Which is why, if you just look at the font of the sportswear that she's using, it's very much like, it reminds me of like an Umbro font. Like the Umbro, like when England jersey used to be made by Umbro. It's kind of like a very similar font, but then she has obviously the detailing. Also, the collar looks like that really thick collar looks very similar to the old football jerseys. So stuff like that. So why I always love Martine Rose's work is I just see her work and I see where the references come from, and they're so witty and funny and interesting. And I love a designer that, has a sense of humor, but also in her own merit, she has these silhouettes and a certain tailoring aesthetic that people use also. And she also has this, like, because her work is so referential to her own experience and what she saw growing up, there are also these ideas of like family. Like even this piece that you're looking at on the screen, this is a piece full of portraits of just friends and family, for example. And there's always like this homely vibe within Martine Rose's work. Greenhead said Martine is too Londoner. Cornbow, I totally agree, where Cornbow says she pays attention to culture and informs her audience by manipulating the mundane. I totally agree with that. Someone said it reminds me of Diesel. I mean, Martine Rose has been doing this kind of stuff before, like this new school Y2K sort of Glenn Martin's diesel aesthetic. Like Martine Rose has been doing that forever. Um, but yeah, I can see why people would say you can see some diesel there. I get that. Yeah, Cornbow is saying subcultural fashion. Also, I find it interesting that even down to like the color palette and like panels and stuff, because obviously Inter Milan has like a stripy jersey, but it's like black and blue. And Martine Rose has made her own kind of like Inter Milan play top, where she's kind of like using the same panels but in different colors. Oh, Rugob says, I mean 90s diesel, I'm old. Being old is a good thing. I'm jealous of people that are a lot older than me because they got to live through a time period of fashion that I wasn't born in. And so I have to like ask people and live through them, or I just have to go to museums. That's why I'm always going to museums, because I just have to see the stuff up close, especially clothing or like documentaries or whatever. So being old is a good thing. There's a lot of positives to being older. She recognizes that Inter Milan is the coolest shirt. Facts. I have an Inter Milan jersey and I'm not even an Inter Milan fan. I just like the way it looks. Also, sorry, I went on a tangent in terms of the football jersey and stuff, but like once again, the actual main point of this collection was challenging beauty standards. So for example, you have a dress like this where you can see like the bra detailing on the dress is like mad oversized, and it almost forces you to like look at the breast area. Once again, talking about like an area, the boobs, where a lot of people do plastic surgery and stuff like that. So yeah, it's just one of those things where she's using her clothing also to push your eye to certain parts of the body to get you to think about you know, beauty standards and like the way we sexualize things. It's the same reason why you see the leather panels at the crotch and all those kind of things. Like even now, if she doesn't have the leather panel at the crotch, now she has this zip detailing around the groin area, which I really like. But yeah, I just love Martine Rose because she has a way, because you look at her clothing and a lot of it is like weird and then a lot of it is commercial. I think it's weird in a fun, witty, interesting way. But she has a way of making commercial clothing fun, which I think a lot of designers struggle to do. And she has a sense of humor, like I said earlier, with her clothing that a lot of designers struggle with. So that's what I really, really, really appreciate about Martine Rose's work. So yeah, I'm definitely a fan. I would say I'm a fan of everyone in the category of this menswear thing. So it's really fun just going through their work and just, you know, like seeing it and talking about it. I always love a time to talk about Martine Rose's work because I'm always obsessed. But that being said, I think that Martine Rose is very good at world building. She's good at her cultural commentary through clothing. And yeah, I just think she's witty. Even, and it's not just the clothing, it's the marketing campaigns, it's the way things are branded, it's where her stuff is shown. So yeah, that being said, now that I've talked about Martine Rose, who do you guys think should and will win the award? Who do you guys think should win? Obviously, the poll is still up. I'm sure you guys have voted, but air your opinions. Who do you think should be the person that walks away with the British Menswear Designer of the Year award at the British Fashion Awards? David Archer says, like Balenciaga for people who are not edgelords. That's an interesting way to see it, actually. I wore my black Martine Rose shocks to Burger in the month they dropped. Shut that place down. Luke says Craig Green should win. Jonathan Anderson will win. Someone's Yeshua says JW Anderson gonna win, but Martine Rose should win. Yeah, how I think it's gonna go is if JW Anderson doesn't win the Designer of the Year award, he has to win one of them, either or, of Menswear Designer of the Year or Women's Wear Designer of the Year, either or. So I can see that happening. Rugob says, "Will there be a video on who wins?" Yes, definitely. I'll definitely jump on live when the winners are announced. It won't be like that long of a live actually, because I think before it's almost more fun to speculate and look at the collections and look at the inspirations. But after you've done that and then you see who wins, it's kind of like, oh, this person won, that person won, and we can kind of comment on why we think that was the case. But yeah. Luke says JW Anderson's not winning women's wear. Interesting. I don't know, but it will be confirmed rigged if Kim Jones wins. Damn. Okay, David says, I think Martine should win, but think JW Anderson will win. Interesting. It's quite insane, though, that JW Anderson was nominated for literally 3 awards. And it's not just the fact he was nominated for 3 awards, it's also the fact that in all 3 awards, it's Jonathan Anderson for JW Anderson and LOEWE. Because it's not like Kim Jones in the women's wear section, they put like Kim Jones for, Fendi or whatever. Like, they were like, no, JW Anderson for JW Anderson and LOEWE on all 3. It's crazy to have 3 nominations. As long as a knock wins top model. The JW Anderson collusion too powerful. Exactly, JW Anderson low key being positioned as the golden child. I mean, he deserves it. I think that he's super influential in fashion. I think his designs are super influential. It's just insane. Like, give a few other brands a chance. Like, he's already won so many awards, I can't even count, at past award shows anyway. So yeah. Industry has to give Martine Rose something. Yeah. So on that note, thank you very much, guys, for coming to my very long TED Talk. Like I said, if you are interested in chatting about fashion with me and the community of this channel, then definitely join the Discord. We talk about fashion all the time. And yeah, thank you very much for tuning in.